For my paper, I chose to write about Hebrews 10:26 through 27. This book was written to Jewish converts who were being tempted, and the letter was very hard to determine who the author was. There is some theory that it was Paul, and this is also, you'll hear labeled as the Epistle of Paul to Hebrews. So the dating was very hard, but it was before the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, because it is said that if it was written after, then there would be some kind of mention of it. But the verse that I chose reads as, "Dear friends, if we deliberately continue sinning after we have received knowledge of the truth, there is no longer any sacrifice that will cover these sins. There is only the terrible expectation of God's judgment and the raging fire that will consume his enemies." So like I said, this letter was written to Jewish converts, and I started my paper off with kind of laying that out so that we would know who the recipients were and why it was written in the context that it was. So I began my body with God's sovereignty, to let readers know about what the Jewish converts already knew. They understood God's sovereignty. They understood who he was and his great power and his great love. They knew all of this. And this was the fourth warning that is given in the book of Hebrews, and it's just chapter 10. So this was their fourth warning, like I said. So my second section was, I wanted to touch on the deliberately sinning. Deliberate is, in the verse, is the action, or it refers to the action. And so I touched on that a good bit because I wanted us to realize that deliberately means you're just choosing to. You are willing, you have free will offering to sin, and you understand the cost of it, and you understand that you're doing it against the love of God. The voluntary act to deliberately sin only increases the reason that those sinners will not gain repentance once they finish. So my third section that I touched on was the judgment and fire. I wanted people to understand the consequence. It's not going to be a good consequence. It's not easy. It's not going to be heaven. God rewards us for what we do, but we also face punishment for what we choose to do as well. And so I touched on that too, and I wanted to create a section for the final remarks in Hebrews, even though that wasn't, part of my verse. I wanted to touch on the end of it and where the author was coming from. It wasn't to hurt, and it wasn't to tear down. It was to simply warn the readers, which being the Jewish converts. So I gave a conclusion of, just kind of everything I talked about in my paper. So that's pretty much it. And I did a little bit more research on the final remarks that I put in my conclusion as well. But that's it.